This is the Word Study Kit 2, Theme I. We're going to be examining how the free base elements ending with final F, L, S, or Z behave. First of all, the big ideas around this theme are that there are phonemes within graphemes that are appropriate and necessary, sort of the sounds that you see based on the letters. But there are also graphemic construction patterns to which spellings must conform to be complete. To put that into terms that maybe will be more accessible, certainly for myself they were, when we spell phonetically, sounding things out, we can get a close approximation, in some cases, of how a word should look then with the letters. But we also, in the English language, have construction patterns that necessitate that we provide graphemes in ways following rules. This will become clearer throughout the theme. This theme explains the grapheme construction patterns that apply to base elements that have the final F, L, S, or Z. The pattern only applies to bases that are free bases, and the free bases to which it applies must also be lexical, not function words. Various spellings that appear not to conform to the pattern are examined and explained throughout the theme, and in some cases I'm going to leave that examination up to you. To get ready for this theme, you need to make sure that you, especially, and your kids to a certain extent, understand the difference between free and bound base elements. Many of the bases that we work with function as standing words, like steam, act, and echo, written there. They're known as free bases. They can stand alone. There are other bases, however, that can only occur as words when there's an affix attached, either a suffix or a prefix. One that we've certainly worked with and is used in this theme is the bound base rupt. It means that you have to bind something to it in order for it to become a word. Making sure that you have an understanding of that process is important, because your students may be asking you questions about why there isn't a double letter at the end of a word, but if it is a bound base, that's why. So make sure you have these two items clear in your mind. There's also a way that you can sort of work with bound and free bases with your class. This is the element rupt, R-U-P-T, and there is a matrix provided on the server that allows you to work through this with your kids and to identify how this by itself, R-U-P-T does not act as a word in our language. It has to have these either prefixes or suffixes, or in some cases both attached. We're going to explore this more in depth and Kit 4 Theme B. But this might be a good sort of way to get your kids thinking at the beginning and to ensure that you understand the difference between a free and a bound base. To prepare for this theme, you also need to understand that there are non-phonological factors in the spelling of bases. Real spellers know that there may be letters in words that are there for unrelated reasons, not having anything at all to do with pronunciation. Sometimes those words are etymological markers, as in we've already examined the word yolk and how the L in Y-O-L-K is an etymological marker to the yellow color of that part of an egg. So keeping that in mind as you go through this theme, there's also some information on page 6 that you could refresh your own memory about. The other thing that you need to remind yourself of, and we did some work with this with Pete when he visited, was the difference between lexical and function words. Function words are words that are usually written with as few letters as possible. Examples being we, or be. These words have a function in the language, and their function is much more important in some ways than their meaning. They're not sort of vocabulary words. They're the words that act as the glue to put a sentence together, to help us with meaning, but they are not items, they're not vocabulary. Lexical words, on the other hand, are words that have stress. They're bulked up to ensure that they always, if not most often, always have 3 letters. You can see in the word egg, and that was the tutorial there on the right that Melvin, we looked at it last year, is why isn't egg spelled E-G? And that's because for it to have sort of a significance in the written language, it needed to have, according to the guys who developed it, more than 2 letters. So we added a double letter at the end in order to provide that bulking up. A good sort of exercise to do with your students and certainly for yourself is to understand how to tell the difference between these. When function words have homophones, the lexical homophone will have more letters. That's pretty clear. The function word OR, of course, the lexical homophone, ORE and OAR, have 3 versus the function word, which has 2. Prepositions are function words and will have shorter spellings than their lexical homophones. So it's always about the number of letters as well as sort of the heft and meaning. I think that's another way to think of it. This theme, however, we are only looking at lexical words. We're not looking at the doubling conventions on function words. The main theme is to examine the graphemic construction pattern, and it is with, as I said, free lexical base elements whose final letter is either F, L, S, or Z. And there is only one vowel in the base, and there's no other letter between it and the final F, L, S, or Z. Then we're going to end up doubling that final letter. This is a convention that I think throughout the theme you'll see some good ways to remember this rather than me just telling it to you. So let's move on. Here's an overview, just a written overview of the pattern. You would ask yourself, my example there in red is the word bluff, spelled phonetically B-L-U-F. You'd ask yourself, does the phonological spelling, the way it would be spelled based on sound, of the base element have a final F, L, S, or Z sound? And yes, it does. It has the F, and we are representing that with an F. If it does, then we continue and we ask ourselves, is the base we're constructing both free and lexical? It sure is. We can, bluff is a word that stands on its own, and it's a lexical word. It's not a little bitty function word. So we can keep going. Does the spelling contain only one vowel letter? It sure does. There's that single vowel U in the word bluff, so we continue. Is there already another letter between the single vowel letter and the final F, L, S, or Z? There is. The letter between there, of course, is the L, and I should have, oh, sorry, no, there isn't one. I read that wrong. There is none, so we continue. If there isn't a letter between the vowel and the final F, L, S, or Z, then we double it. And that's how we come to the complete spelling of B-L-U-F-F. This is maybe an easier way to consolidate this idea, and this is also on the server. This is a flowchart that Melvin put together that helps analyze whether or not you would be doubling the letter at the end. There's some other ways to investigate this with kids, some questions they may come up with or questions you could pose for inquiry-based discussion and learning. Here's one. Why isn't IF spelled IFF when words like cliff, sniff, stiff, and whiff have all doubled Fs? The answer is that IF is a conjunction, and real spellers know conjunction or function words. This pattern only applies to lexical words. What is the history of OF, of, and OFF? Historically, in Old English, they were spelled the exact same way, but around the time of Shakespeare, they changed it to OF becoming a preposition, again, a function word, and OFF becoming an adverb. We know that to be a lexical word, we would double it. So that's why OFF is doubled. Why isn't chef, C-H-E-F, spelled with a double F at the end? We would spell it, if we were doing it phonologically, and also if we were doing it in English, probably S-H-E-F-F would be the most conventional way to spell it. However, this word isn't from the English language, and so the rules that we are learning don't apply if the word is from another origin. We can also investigate base elements that have the final L. This is a nice little pattern you could draw and put up, and you're working, of course, with base, free, and lexical words. You need to make sure that there is only one vowel letter and that there is not another letter between the final L there, and then you would double it. You can have students practice with these words in purple right there. Some other questions that you can pose, or maybe they will ask you, are things like the spelling of until. Why isn't it doubled? The base UNTIL contains more than one vowel letter, so the final L will not double. Again, all of these things fit into the pattern that we've constructed, but having kids offer up ways to debunk the pattern may be a very good way to set up this for learning and to engage them. Also, why is the suffix FUL not spelled with a double L when the base FULL is? This was actually a question that Melvin put in the theme that was posed to him by a teacher. And it's a good question, very good question, especially if you haven't had the training that we're giving our kids. What a gift, because right off the bat you know that FUL is a suffix, and it shouldn't more than likely behave by the same rules that a base word is. So with these two different elements, of course, they aren't the same. We don't add FULL to the ends of words and drop an L or something crazy like that. The suffix is FUL. So then what happens with a word FULL when you add the suffix LY? There's a reminder for this, sort of a tutorial that you can hover your mouse over on page 10. My guess, and if you have something different, I hope you'll add a comment to this, but my guess is that we have a convention or a principle in English that reminds us that we do not write three letters together in any word of English origin. So that's my guess on that question. There's other spellings that you can investigate for free base elements that have the final S. This is interesting because there's a plural canceling convention, which states that a word that is not a plural is not allowed to appear as if it might be plural. It's one of the things that the guys who set this all up tried to make clear so that people weren't confused. So really, even without our pattern, there would be little likelihood that free bases would have the doubled S's anyway. So two ways in which the possible plural single of a final S can be canceled. The most usual way is we add a single silent E at the end, as in the word please, browse, BROWSE, and lapse, LAPSE. It helps us as a marker there. This is that idea that there's an etymological reason or there's a place marker. Not necessarily is it functioning phonetically, but it gives us a way to tell the two words apart. We can also cancel the appearance of the plural by doubling a final S. This I thought was very interesting. I just didn't see it this way in my mind, but the word PAS or MAS could be confused with talking about more than one father or mother because the S on the end indicates it's plural. So clearly, by adding a double S to these two words, we have very, very different vocabulary words and different spellings. There's more work on the doubling of S on page 12. Finally, the final free base element that we're interested in doubling at the end of a word if it fits our pattern and conventions is the letter Z. However, it occurs very infrequently in English where the function of Z is mainly filled by S. And we know there's another theme that talks about how S can make a S or a Z sound. So in words of Greek origin, the letter Z is proportionately more frequent. You can just about bet that they're Greek. Complete English words don't usually end with a single Z. It is either doubled or, if represented by an S making the Z sound, followed by a final single non-syllabic E, as in ooze and breeze. I think this is a fun theme for kids. It's certainly one that I had no spelling sense of for myself as a speller. There was always that question in my mind as to why you would double some of these letters at the ends of words, and this theme really helped to clear it up. Thanks.